Thank you for joining our webinar, the Smart Lab, the IoT, and the Data-Driven Lab Manager. During this presentation, we'll cover a few different but connected topics while leaving time for Q&A at the end. My colleague Adam Sweat and I will be presenting. Here's a little background about each of us.
Thanks, Rob. I've spent the last 5 years working with Internet of Things companies, most recently at Digital Lumens, one of the early leaders in the smart lighting market. At Elemental Machines, I'm the Senior Application Engineer, managing field deployments, training, and customer support. Prior to becoming a civilian, I was a submarine officer in the U.S. Navy.
Thanks, Adam. I'm the Director of Sales for Elemental Machines, having joined the company most recently from Intuitive Surgical. I have spent the last 20 years in sales and marketing focused on driving the adoption of disruptive technology. In terms of logistics, this presentation should run about 20 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. If you'd like to submit a question, please use the questions panel and go to webinar. In addition, we will post a recorded version of the webinar for future reference, and we will send that out to all participants. Now let's dive in. Although we do not work in the lab ourselves, we do work with terrific lab managers every day. Through our experience, we have identified three main challenges that we see them facing as they balance a variety of responsibilities. The first challenge lab managers face is that they straddle two critical, albeit different roles. On one hand, they manage their organization's day-to-day needs. On the other, they're working on strategic issues to support their organization's longer-term goals. From a day-to-day perspective, lab managers juggle everything from equipment maintenance and operational issues to employee training and record keeping. At the same time, they are also building long-term roadmap of how to support their organization's evolving needs. Beyond the conflicting demands of the role, the second challenge we see has to do with the fact that labs are full of people, materials, and precisely executed processes. The physical nature of the lab environment has historically made acquiring data tedious, time-consuming, and extremely expensive. As a result, variable data from a myriad of sources is often missing. The third issue we see, really the macro issue, is that this lack of data slows scientific progress. So let's take a look at what we mean by data issues. This slide may be a little painful to look at, but it captures the reality of many labs. Issues include managing data that is already being collected, as well as data blind spots created by missing data. In terms of managing data, information is often stored on legacy equipment that is not easily accessible. And the tried and true notebook is definitely one of the most ineffective ways to share data. Then there are the applications that teams use to manage data, many of which are designed for individual users. Those legacy software programs are not optimized for the open flow of data. And there are still other issues which can lead to problems down the road. Through our experience talking with numerous teams about their challenges, we often see additional hurdles. The most pervasive is missing data, information that's not gathered for one reason or another. Still, other challenges are the tedious manual processes used to collect data, and corrupted data, or data that is completely isolated. Given the value placed on data in science, the fact that there are so many data challenges to be solved is more than a little ironic. So how do we address the issue? The answer lies in direct access to comprehensive, high-quality data that can be easily digested. Adam will take a deeper dive into some of the specifics.
Thanks, Rob. Easy access to complete, well-integrated data gives lab managers a virtual crystal ball. Data can be powerful. With the right data-driven insights, you can predict equipment failures and reduce downtime. Good data can help lab managers optimize use of staff, and high-resolution data makes it possible for researchers to find correlations between data sets. All of this depends on having the right data available at the right time. So then the question becomes, what data is important to gather? We're talking about every piece of data that you can possibly acquire. This ranges from equipment performance, usage, maintenance, and calibration to precise information on reagent and sample storage conditions. We're also pulling data from successive experimental runs and comparing it to environmental data captured during those runs. The more data we can pull in to parse and filter, the more likely it is that we can find corollaries. So let's take a look at what I mean by a high-resolution data set. In most labs, someone walks around and takes manual readings from equipment on a daily basis. Those data points are recorded and archived to a binder, a folder, or under a pile of letters on someone's desk. The reality is that a single data point tells you something fairly binary, that the equipment is either working or not. Those individual data points aren't very interesting, even if they are essential. In contrast, a highly granular data set gathered across the same span tells a rich and complex story. It offers a detailed picture of equipment performance, usage, peak usage times, and other interesting information. In this graph, you can clearly see the patterns that indicate normal operating conditions. You can also see anomalies that indicate changes to the environment. In this case, this can be attributed to opening a door. It's a simple but vivid illustration of the different approaches to data collection. The same principle can be applied all across the lab to every piece of equipment. In short, easy access to comprehensive, high-quality data helps teams to locate the proverbial needle in the haystack. And that's where the IoT and the smart lab come in. In just a few short years, the Internet of Things and smart technologies have fundamentally changed how we manage everything, from personal fitness to home to our commutes, our offices, and seemingly everything in between. IoT-based systems collect data from sensors and devices that use that data to improve and optimize processes. Those same technologies that are used in your fitness tracker or your smart thermostat are now poised and available to transform the lab. To get connected in IoT, you need a few things, building blocks if you will. A bunch of tiny sensors, pervasive connectivity like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and other standardized protocols, cloud computing power and processing, and remote storage, and a way to get to that data to be able to use it. Applying those building blocks to the smart lab, you can custom tailor an IoT solution that will work for you. With the three basic pillars in place, teams can harvest numerous benefits. These include lowering labor costs and reducing equipment downtime, as well as remote monitoring and process optimization, and ultimately, improved experimental accuracy and repeatability. At the heart of the smart lab is automated data gathering. We can then process that data via sensors and equipment data feeds. Instrument data is harvested and sent to the cloud for analysis, sharing, and storage. This allows teams to take action and automatically respond to issues if something urgent arises, and provides easy to digest information that is critical to ensuring smooth processes. If something comes up down the road, you can also access all the historical data securely in one place. For a real-world example, let's take a look at incubator monitoring. We all know that sensitive cultures can perish if conditions aren't precisely maintained. This is why people often stay in the lab to monitor them. What you see here is a chart showing CO2 levels inside of an incubator. There are a few dips, but to the right is a more prolonged drop. When that happened, an automated alert was sent off to notify staff that there was an issue. In this particular case, the CO2 tank had run out and they needed to be replaced. The staff then took care of that immediately, ensuring success to their experiment. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rob so he can take a closer look at some ways that teams are using the smart lab technologies today. Rob?
Thanks, Adam. In addition to showing when something is performing outside of specification, as with the incubator example, high-resolution data also makes it easy to understand the normal performance of a single piece of equipment or of an entire fleet. This makes it possible to spot changes in impending maintenance needs. That insight can be used to create maintenance schedules or identify pieces of equipment that should be retired. In addition, once you start to monitor multiple pieces of equipment, you can then start to compare an individual asset against a fleet of similar equipment to see how it is performing. Utilization data shows how teams are using assets, including which equipment is used most frequently or not at all. It can also provide other insights like how long equipment takes to recover from a door being opened, for example. Smart lab technologies can also help improve repeatability by documenting processes and environmental conditions to ensure that the context in which the protocol was run was identical each time. If, for example, there were variations in the outcomes and in the conditions, the data can be used to explore their relationship. It's also worth noting that having high-quality research data can help scale up process down the road. If GLP certification is a requirement in your facility, Smart lab technologies can help. They simplify data gathering and record keeping by automatically generating regular reports. One of the cornerstones of the smart lab is data integration. Systems built around open standards and with API-level integration are a must. The purpose of the smart lab isn't to create another massive data archive that never gets used. Instead, the smart lab is about creating a comprehensive and centralized platform that helps the team do their work faster. Some of the benefits of the smart lab are quantifiable, while others are more qualitative. At the qualitative end of the spectrum, smart labs provide peace of mind. Teams know that their equipment and processes are monitored around the clock, and that they'll know if something is amiss anytime, day or night. With comprehensive monitoring also comes the freedom and ability to actually leave the lab, at least on occasion. At the quantitative end of the spectrum are the savings. Savings come from avoiding costly equipment failures that compromise valuable samples and materials. Savings also come from staff that no longer need to manually monitor equipment and processes, and whose time can be allocated to more valuable work. The question is, what does a smart lab mean for the lab manager? Adam is going to take a closer look at this.
Thanks, Rob. First and foremost, smart lab technologies really ask lab managers to modify their roles, supported by new platforms and data sources. It starts with thinking about the role itself and the goals that can be achieved to access to new solutions. Some lab managers are taking a data-first approach. They can think creatively about how to support organizational goals, both for tactical and strategic objectives. Real-time data from every facet of the lab means fundamental changes in the lab manager's role in both subtle and direct ways. For starters, data is no longer an archival issue, it's actionable. Lab managers still have custodial responsibility, but it's driven by the overall data strategy. Data can now be used to visualize and evaluate key operational metrics and optimize performance. Automated data gathering lets lab managers take a more proactive approach. With access to granular data, they can spot evidence of impeding issues and address them before disaster strikes. No more puddles in front of a failed freezer on Monday morning. Teams can also make informed decisions about when to do certain types of work. For example, one of our customers does work that is very sensitive to humidity. They only run dry down studies when humidity in the lab is at an optimum level, saving time and money that would otherwise be wasted if they ran at a different time of day. At the highest level, the IoT and Smart Lab enable lab managers to focus on the big picture. They now have the tools to help their teams work more efficiently, avoid downtime, and save money. The IoT and Smart Lab technologies truly enable teams to think differently about their work and what they can accomplish. The key is to have a broader strategy. Teams should ensure that solutions and technologies that they adopt support the longer-term goal. At Elemental Machines, we're focused on helping our customers implement the Smart Lab vision, starting with a comprehensive monitoring and data-driven insight. We're not going to delve too deeply into the system details here, but we'd be happy to talk with you if you have questions or would be interested in the pilot installation. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. Let's take a quick look at your questions. If you have any additional questions for us, please make sure to submit them via the panel, and we'll read through the questions aloud and respond.
Thanks, Adam. Take a minute to wait for questions. Okay, looks like there's a question. It's what pieces of equipment do most people want to monitor? I can take this one, Adam. We see a variety of equipment being monitored in the lab, everything from cold storage, liquid nitrogen tanks, all the way up to -80, -20 freezers, up to refrigerators, all the way to high temp incubators and growth chambers. We also see a lot of labs now monitoring their lab environment and monitoring environmental conditions like temperature, pressure, light, and humidity as well. Second question came in, are your devices NIST traceable and can they be calibrated? Adam, do you want to speak to this?
Sure. Yes, our devices can be ordered as a NIST traceable device with all the supporting documentation included. as well, they can be calibrated and they can be set to ensure that any offsets are taken care of during that mistraceable certification. Then the periodicity is left to the lab to determine on when those get recalibrated along with our manufacturer's recommendations.
Thank you. There's one more question. What options do you have for high temperature sensors for inside ovens? What flexibility do those sensors and dashboards have? Adam, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure. We have various types of thermocouples that we can run into high temperature applications. The standard ones that we carry are up to 200C or 250C, but for any additional applications, you can feel free to contact us and we can let you know if we can support that specific application. We've definitely done lots of studies inside of ovens and inside of high temperature incubators, so they do support that application in general.
Thank you. Yep, there's one more. How long does it typically take to set up a smart lab? So I can talk about this. Typically, it has to do with the amount or the size of the deployment. You know, a deployment can be from anywhere from 5 to 10 individual sensors or monitor devices, all the way up to several hundred. But to do the individual deployment, it can range from 5 to 10 minutes on a small deployment to a couple hours. Each one of the sensors has they're completely wireless, battery operated, and have magnets for ease of use and deployment. And Adam and I recently did a deployment for 250 sensors, and I think it took about 3 hours to have all the devices deployed and set up on the dashboard. So there's one last one here. What's the most interesting use of the Smart Lab data you've seen? Adam, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. We have several different types of uses of the Smart Lab data, and it really varies depending on what level of adoption the labs are in. We don't necessarily recommend that you outfit your entire lab immediately with all of the sensors. Some people start with a smaller deployment and then move their way into something a little bit more complex. So depending on how people have deployed their sensors, it can be a different end use. We've had customers that save hundreds of thousands of dollars because they catch equipment failures before those go down, and those are extremely interesting to that customer. As far as like a complicated install where we looked at a lot of different environmental factors and took those into account, we had a customer that was interested in humidity, similar to the story that I told while we were doing the webinar, but they wanted to look at humidity across their entire production facility and understand how humidity changed based on the location within their facility. They had humidity control devices, but they weren't exactly sure how those were operating. So we created a 2D humidity map for them that changed over time, and then we could correlate that to the humidity data and to the yield data so that we could understand how humidity was affecting their results and how their equipment to control humidity was performing.
Thanks, Adam. So in summary, I just want to take a second to thank everyone for their time today. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to jump on the webinar. We do apologize for the slight glitch at the beginning with the slides, and we'll make the presentation available and we'll send it out to all participants. If there are no further questions, we will sign off and look to speak with each of you individually. Thanks for your time today.